All right, everybody, welcome back to our series on Plato's The Republic. We are going to summarize Book 2, offer some commentary, and then take any questions from you, the gentle listener, as we move along here. So I'm joined once again
Excellent.
by Dr. Jim Madden. Good day to you, sir.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you.
Now, I had an absolute blast in our first conversation. I'm so glad that we're doing this series on Plato's The Republic. I know you're on book 4 now with your actual
I
students.
I gave 3 hours of lectures on book 4 this morning, right?
Excellent. Yeah.
So I'm forging the path for us here.
Yeah. Scroll 4.
Scroll 4. Yeah, I see Saul in the comments said he just listened to scroll 2, right? Right. Excuse me.
All right. So let's if it's cool with you, good sir, why don't we just
So-
dive right in? Why don't I'm going to let you
Stand by to get some, as it's been said. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to let you lead the way again in this conversation. I think the format
Sure.
worked well last time.
Let's
So
do it.
give us the sort of maybe 10,000 foot view. What's going on here in
Mhm.
book 2? Who are the primary characters we need to pay attention to, and then we can just kind of drill down into the details as we move along.
Okay. And I always like especially new with a text like this, to always have a one step backward, 2 steps forward technique. So let's recall where we left off at the end of book 1. Okay. Right. And I think that there's a structural thing that goes on there at the end of book 1 that explains much of what's going to go on at the end of book 2. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we know in book 1, they arrive at the party, right? The kegger, as it were.
Yeah, Kepler's kegger. I love it.
Yeah, well, yeah. Polymarchus is throwing a kegger, but his dad thinks it's okay, right? And so his dad shows up, but he goes to bed early, right?
Pretty typical.
Pretty typical, yeah. I mean, in my experience, right? Anyway, and so, Kepler is, said that, and I think this is the important thing, is that what gives him the greatest comfort in his old age as he faces death is his confidence that he's lived with justice. Okay. And then that raises the question, like, well, gee, we'd like to live with justice too, so we wouldn't have to fear death in our old age. Mm-hmm. And so, Polymarchus floats a definition of justice, kind of the proverbial Greek wisdom that's, taking what you're owed and giving what you owe someone else, basically, right? And where specifically they mean goods and punishments. That definition breaks down. Our guy Thrasymachus shows up and says, well, justice just is might makes right, basically. That becomes problematic. And he says, well, look, even if we knew what justice was, it wouldn't be worth it anyway, because it's always in your interest to be unjust if you can get away with it. Okay. The important thing, though, I want to emphasize here and going to book 2 is this interesting thing about how, one, we mentioned last time that they are congregating for this party in what would be known as the city of thieves, right? This is harbor town, okay? And they're struggling at the end of book 1 for their definition of justice, or even any motive for justice. And Socrates makes his point by asking what would the absolute conditions be of there being a practically effective band of thieves. Okay. And even Thrasymachus agrees, yeah, they would have to be just with respect to each other. Okay. And the reason is because otherwise they couldn't act. There's not any one thing a disunified band of thieves could do. So there has to be a principle of unity among the many, right? A one in the many that allows there to be any kind of action at all, where an action is sort of the intentional achievement of a good.
Right.
Okay.
Excellent. Mm-hmm.
And Thrasymachus even say, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess even we thieves would have to have justice among us. But no, we've already kind of figured out what justice is the principle of unity among disparate parts, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, or would be really being good at that to some degree. And then immediately there's a jump to the soul. Okay, so what would justice be? In a very big, quick leap, well, justice would be the virtue of the soul. Okay, it would be the excellence of the soul. It would be what it is to have a good soul. And I think then last time we recalled, for the Greeks, what soul means is maybe different than a lot of us think it means now. It's not an entity or an individual. It's the continuity among the parts of an organism such that it forms an organism, not a decomposing corpse, right? So what is the soul? It is that counts for this thing as working together, right?
A principle of configuration, a configurating principle, right?
Yeah, configurating principle. And such that the organism can act on its own behalf. It can act for an intended good. And then they say, so then justice in the individual, right? If justice in the group is, the having a good coordinating principle such that you can act for your own good, what is justice in the individual? It would be the excellence of the soul, which is to say, to have a really good internal organizing principle such that you can act on your own behalf. Okay. Right. Okay. And so, by the way, that's the whole book, right? But there'll be some details for the next.
I wanna mark a potential and important distinction here, especially if we have, as I'm sure we do, a lot of Thomists listening in. The concept of justice here is different than how you might think about it in later natural law theory.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's worth emphasizing that distinction. It's in this sense far more broad.
Yeah,
I think. Right.
Yeah, and I kind of I don't know the languages well enough, but that's just generally true of me. But I don't know the language well enough. But it makes me wish we had a different word besides justice to use here. Okay, because in fact, that kind of more traditional sense of that natural law, later natural law sense of justice that you mentioned there is much like Polemarchus's definition early on.
Right. Yeah. It's giving to somebody what they are owed with, specific qualifications of what's owed in particular circumstances to people. Right. So it has ways of getting away getting around the counter examples that Socrates gives. But you're right. It's much closer to our boy or dude Polemarchus's definition.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think it's important to note that, because otherwise, there's a lot of confusion about the text if you think what this thing is about is like distributive justice.
Right. It's really it's really about the whole good of the person at the end of the day. Right?
So the way I put it to my students is what the Republic is about is, it's ultimately, he tells at the end of book 1, what I'm talking about here is the virtue of the soul. And what does that really mean? It's like what we would say today is how to live your best life. Like what is the best way of life for the human being such that the human being can act on its own behalf? It can really act. Okay.
Right. Excellent.
It can achieve goods. Yeah.
Real quick, I just want to highlight this comment from Ira. She says, I'm drinking a beer like Pat right now. Got to get rid of everything in the fridge. Party on, Pat. This is not a beer. Sure. This is if it has ice in it for one thing, so it'd be kind of weird. This is actually sparkling water with a hint of pineapple juice, and it's nice. It's exceedingly refreshing, and I would highly recommend it. But either way, cheers to you. Excellent. Irish.
I'm rocking the black coffee.
Yeah, I'm coffeeed out today. I already hit my limit. So okay, that's good. I'm glad we made that distinction, because I wanted to be clear about that. Like, yes, we have our 4 cardinal virtues in traditional natural law, but the way we're thinking about justice here is far more encompassing, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So the way I think what we're going to find out as we read the text is in the Republic, what justice is the way I put it, is a meta virtue. It's a virtue about the coordination of the other virtues.
That's
right.
Excellent.
Yeah. Like it's a virtue that it basically emerges once all the other 3 cardinal virtues are in place. Right. And as we'll see when we get to book 4 in a couple of days here, Polemarchus's definition is going to get cycled back out again, and they're actually going to say, "Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about all along," but not really, because it's been nuanced. It's been nuanced in a very serious way. So my take, and I could be correct on this, is that in the Republic, justice is a meta virtue.
I agree.
Yeah, it's sort of an emergent virtue that comes with the other 3 virtues.
Yeah. Excellent. Good. Okay, I'm glad that has covered. We have re-summarized book 1. I think the stage is set for book 2. Yeah. So. Yeah, let's begin. Where do you want to kick this off?
Just as an aside, I find in my teaching, I do best on the re-summary, right? So because I'm retrospective.
Only downhill from here, friends. Right?
Yeah, no. So what happens is okay, when I summarize, Friday's class on Monday, I have like the advantage of retrospection on that class. So I do Friday's class best in the 10-minute summary on Monday morning, right? Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, party on.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, so book 2. Thrasymachus took off, right? And now, but Glaucon and Adeimantus, and I think Polymarchus is still there. And remember, Glaucon and Adeimantus are Plato's actual brothers, and they are students of Socrates. And it's interesting. You think we just get on with the party now, but we can't, because Glaucon says, look, well, he begins by distinguishing three types of goods, right? So you have goods that are good in and of themselves, and not and though they don't necessarily have any further external consequences that you would welcome, right? They're intrinsically good, but they're not extrinsically good. Right. Then he says there's the best kind of good, which is intrinsically good and extrinsically good. So you desire it for itself and its consequences. Right. And then you have purely extrinsic goods that you only want them because of their consequences, and in and of themselves they would be bads. Okay.
Right. So real quick, just leading up to this, right? So Glaucon he's not satisfied with where the conversation ended with Thrasymachus. So he's like, look, Socrates, you charm that man like a snake charmer, right? I love all the languaging in
but
this.
We all knew Thrasymachus wasn't very bright.
We all know he's a dope, right? So the fact that you dispatched of him's no big deal. You need to satisfy me, buddy.
Yeah,
right?
It's exactly. Yeah. Okay, so now that the grown-ups are here, sir,
right. Let's get serious. And then this is where he challenges Socrates, right? He's challenging him. He's like, look, you're gonna convince me. You're gonna prove to us that justice is worth having, and we're gonna figure out what justice is. Now, here's three classes of goods, and I want you to tell me which class justice belongs to. We have, like you said, right? We have this first class, which are things that are good in of themselves, but they're not the highest good. Like, just like little pleasures, like this little drink I have here, right? This would be one of those goods, right? They're harmless goods, we might say, in a sense, right? For all I know, I don't think that anybody was tortured into making of this or something like that, except for one pineapple. Then we have goods that are really intrinsically good, like knowledge and sight is the example, right? And then we have sort of instrumental goods, like that disgusting good of getting money, of fetching money, right? That sort of thing. And then he challenges Socrates to say which class you think it's in. Socrates says, well, I think it's in the highest class, the things that are the really intrinsically good for their own sake. Like knowledge, for example. And then Glaucon says, yeah, maybe you're right about that, but that's probably not where most people would put it, right?
I agree with you, but that's not what the masses say.
Right.
And I would like to not have persuasion, but conviction.
Right. Yeah. I like this dude's style. It's good.
Yeah. It's a call out. I want to, I mean, I agree with you. My intuitions are with you, Socrates, but I want to level up.
Right. And
I want to be the philosopher.
Here's the interesting thing about Glaucon, because you're right. Like he seems to like agree with where Socrates would be on everything, but he seems to be like a man who like has an intuitive grasp of what justice is, and like he has this intuitive sense that Socrates is right about these things, about justice, but he kind of admits to being like unable to articulate why. So he's like Socrates, like he's kind of like asking Socrates to help him, like help me, right?
Help me understand.
Help me understand, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, remember, keep it in the the general Platonic background. Learning is recollection. Mm-hmm. So Glaucon already knows, but he wants to recollect, right? Mm-hmm. He wants a better reminder. Yeah. Good. And so then what you get is Glaucon pulls out the so he says, I'm going to make trouble for you, Socrates, right? Even though I'm with you, I'm going to make trouble for you. And I think there was a better argument that old Thrasymachus could have made, and he didn't. And he does a thought experiment, right? He does this tale of the Ring of Gyges, where you can get a ring that would make you invisible, right? And I think it would make you visible and make people. Wasn't he saying that they wouldn't be able to remember what you had done, right? So it's a good one, right? And he says, so naturally, our hero takes the ring and he kills the king and takes the queen for his wife and rules the kingdom. And he's able to, because he can trick everybody with the ring, he looks like he has perfect justice on the outside, but inside he has perfect injustice, right?
Okay. And perfect injustice is when you are horrifically unjust, but everybody thinks you're just, right?
Yes.
That's like the height of injustice. Yeah.
It's the height of injustice, right? And Glaucon's sort of, why would I act any different than Gyges, right? why would I act any differently? Because it seems like I'm getting, and remember the question, like this notion of morality, in the sense of absolute rights and wrongs is a little foreign to the Greek mind. I mean, there's a lot we can talk about this, but
Right.
the question is, what would secure you the best life? What would be living your best life? And what Glaucon's saying is, look, man, if you could get the queen and get rid of the king and make yourself king and, be known as the greatest guy around, how is that not your best life? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm getting the goods of injustice and the goods of justice simultaneously. It seems like it's win-win. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if I mentioned this in the last podcast, though. The Ring of Gyges tale for me has this interesting symmetry with the myth of Oedipus, right? Or the Sophocles' tragedy Oedipus, right? So Oedipus Rex. What did Oedipus do? He, there was a prophecy that he would kill his father and sleep with his mother, and he ends up doing exactly that while having the appearance, without him supposedly even knowing it, of being the greatest guy in Thebes. He's the king of Thebes. He saved the city. Everybody loves him. He's got a great family, all the things. He has the appearance of being the perfectly just man, but in fact, inside, deep down below at the subterranean level, he's the most unjust man ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think actually what's going on in Sophocles is he's saying that Oedipus did not have self-knowledge. He didn't really look at who he really was, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what has Socrates claimed to do? He's come to preach that the unexamined life is not worth living, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think there's a shout out there to Sophocles in the myth of Gyges, right?
Right. And it's interesting real quick, because in speed up, to more contemporary times, now you have thought experiments that kind of reverse it. Like, what if somebody thinks they're living not just a just life, but a good life overall, but it's just mere appearances. So, I mean, think of the guy who, he thinks he has a good marriage. He thinks he has a successful business. He thinks his kids love him, but in reality, his wife's cheating with his business partner who's stolen all of his money. His kids hate him. He dies completely ignorant of all that stuff.
He's Oedipus, man.
Right. He never knows better. And then the question is, did he have a good life? And intuitively, most of us are like, nah, something seems really off there. Right. Mm-hmm.
It would be better to live the examined life, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
It would be
cool.
And so, and it's interesting, how much grip this thought experiment should have on us from Glaucon, because it's the perfectly unjust life versus the perfectly just life. But then that doesn't necessarily address the little bit unjust life versus the little bit just life, right? Mm-hmm. What I always do with it, though, is I say, look, can you honestly say that if you had the Ring of Gyges, would you have conducted your day today the same way you did without it, right? And I think very few of us can say, no, I would have done everything exactly the same way, right? And so I think you're seeing, all of us have to admit that there's something about, justice for some of us, or most of us, that it's not really intrinsically good, right? That we feel the grip of it being just entirely extrinsic good, right?
Right. There's a lot of externally motivating factors.
Yeah.
I think I can
the burden of proof.
Yeah, I think I can fairly say Pat Flynn, when he was 20 versus Pat Flynn now, would have answered this question quite differently. However,
no, I mean, I think there's people I would have made comments to if I could have gotten away with it today, even this morning. Yeah, okay, but once again, I am my own flawed person here, right? Now, so then, okay, so. And Socrates says, yeah, hey, you're right. That's a tough one, because it does seem like, Gyges, from like a game theory standpoint, is really winning there. Okay. So he says, all right, let's start over. We got to, and they're like, okay, it's going to be hard. We have to work really hard at this. And, they pray the gods will guide them in the inquiry and all this. And interestingly, comparing it back to book one, we go back to the macrocosm, right? Book one looked at the macrocosm of the city of thieves, right, to get this very broad definition of justice. And now we go to the macrocosm of the ideal city to get the ideal of justice. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how because we need greater specificity of what the ideal is, we can't look at just the city as we find it. We have to look at as the city as it would be in its ideal. Okay? Right.
So Socrates he's impressed by Glaucon's argument. He's kind of like, wow, that's going to be hard to take down. And he proposes that if we're going to try and get at what is essential to justice, it's going to be easier if we look at it in its biggest manifestation, if you will,
like we did in book one, like
we did in book one. And this is of course setting the stage now for an examination of the state, right? And trying to find what is essential to justice, and then we'll kind of try and reduce it back down, if you will.
Yeah.
So,
and so the Adamantus at one point had jumped in on behalf of his brother and said, "Yeah, no one has ever told me exactly what would it be for justice to be in the soul. Like what they may have told me, yeah, justice is the virtue of the soul, but that's just a platitude. Like, but what would it be? What would count for it? How do I live if indeed justice is in my soul?" Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then he says, and also once I know that, what would it be for it to be in my soul? What are the consequences of that? So once again, Adamantus brings up the two questions of the first book: what is justice, and why do I care? Right.
Right.
And Glaucon, has said, yeah, the why do I care question is pretty tough, because it looks like if you could get away with it, you wouldn't do it. Right. Mm-hmm. So all you really care about is not justice, right? Is what you care about is these other goods. Okay. So then Socrates says, yeah, okay, let's go back. Let's do it again. Let's run it back. Let's do it right this time. Let's talk about the macrocosm, because it's easier to see. So what would the ideal city be? Right. Okay. Now the next move is, I think this is brilliant. Okay. Is they ask, why are there cities? Okay. Why do humans form cities? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the answer is because not everybody is good at everything. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you're going to really flourish, Pat needs to raise the cattle and Jim needs to grow the wheat, right?
Right. Or if we want to be more insulting towards business owners, if you're one of the weakest in society, you become a dealer.
You become a dealer, yeah. So and then someone's got to like barter it, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so if I'm an okay cattle breeder, but I'm a really good wheat grower, but I have to do both, then I don't really maximize either good. And kind of Plato's basic economics here. So inevitably, really what you're going to have is, hey, Pat, I won't kill you and like pillage your village if you raise the cattle, right? Mm-hmm. And then you agree, yeah, you won't kill me and pillage my family if I grow the wheat. And now we can specialize. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, this is important for themes we talked earlier, because, one of the overriding themes of the Republic is this idea where there's plurality, there has to be a greater unity that brings it together for there to be being. Mm-hmm. So what necessitates the city? Plurality. We have different talents.
And
right?
Interdependence.
Mm-hmm. Interdependence. And so now, so the city begins in plurality, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then sort of a natural unity here, like, okay, you're good at cattle, I'm good at wheat, right?
But then, which is why later in natural law, we see the state or the nation really as a natural kind, right? So you kind of see the seeds of this here in Platonic thinking, for sure, right?
And you're going to see this come up in Aristotle, where Aristotle, but contrary to Thrasymachus says the polis is an artificial imposition. You should just be out there, Conan the Barbarian, man, on your own. Okay, right. But Aristotle and following Plato says a man alone is a beast or a god, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not one of us, right? We are together. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I want to backtrack to one thing. There's a very, very important footnote in the Reeves, if you're using the Reeves translation.
I'm not. I've got the Benjamin Jowett here. Mm-hmm.
And I'll just mention it because it's going to come up again and again throughout the dialogue, is the reason, they come together and they agree that the reason that Gyges is going to use the ring badly is because in Reeves' translation, we all want to, quote, do better. We want to do better. Okay. And if you read the footnote in the Reeves, and I'm sure it's probably in Jowett too, certainly in Reeves's revision of Jowett, what to do better there means is like kind of like to do better than the other guy. Okay. That inevitably we have this like sick desire to overstep our boundaries. Like however good things are going, if we can get more from someone else, we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think this is Plato like tipping his hat to this like kind of like fundamental, almost Pauline mystery of sin. Right. Like no matter what, we're going to take things further than it's a good idea for us to do it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think this is important in understanding like the formation of the city here. So you have in the first city, right? Okay. So Pat and Jim are, we have different skills. So we kind of like broadly cooperate. Right. And Socrates and the guy say, yeah, that would work. We could all be healthy that way, but we would kind of be living like pigs, right? That's what they say. We're just getting by. And I don't want to just get by. In the Reeves translation, I want relishes, right? So I want salt on my food, and I want to eat pork too. Okay, so we want more. We want to do better, right? We aren't satisfied no matter what. So inevitably, there's going to be war because you're going to have to go and take someone else's territory. You have to steal their pigs, right? And then that's going to lead to like external disunity, internal disunity. Okay, so because we always want to do better, we're going to want relishes. We're going to want more. And Plato doesn't say we shouldn't do this. He's like, it's inevitable. This is human nature, right? So now what are we going to need? We're going to need someone to do the fighting. We're going to need a guardian, right? And so just now that you had the basic the basic crafts that are dealing with just physical need, these appetitive crafts, and now we need a higher order craft, right? We need a soldier, okay? Now, but Plato notes that the soldier, the guardian, has to do more than just fight external enemies. It has to keep internal order too. Okay. So it has to like prosecute the city's wars and protect the city, right? And it has to also then within the city maintain the order among the craftsmen. Okay. So he says the guardian, the soldier, will have to be of two natures. Like a good dog is of two natures. One, it'll have to be able to fight like hell. And the other nature he says it will have to be a philosopher, right? Because what does a good dog do? He doesn't just attack everybody. He only attacks the bad people.
He discriminates, right?
He discriminates. So you have to make judgment. Okay. So now you have this guardian who needs to not only be a great warrior, but a great thinker, a judge, right? Okay. And then the question now becomes, okay, how do we get one of those, right? And then really, like the rest of the book is a treatise on the education of the guardian.
Yes. Right.
Exactly. Right. And,
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. I had a section I wanted to read, but I lost it. So just listeners will have to forgive me for being lazy and not earmarking the relevant passages.
Right. And so, and once again, they'll note this theme of like, the whole thing here is to avoid disunity, to avoid plurality, right? To bring things under one principle. Okay. And now we need someone to do that. All right. And then we get the education of the guardians, right? And Pat, you may have noticed immediately, right? Okay. So, and actually you and I had a wonderful podcast on this summer, right? The guardian's education will have to be of two sorts then. It'll have to be physical education and it will have to be what they call music. Okay. And where music is basically what we would call today the liberal arts, right?
Right. Isn't it funny though that Glaucon puts gymnastics under the third category of goods?
Yes.
Would we still agree with that today?
No.
I know we would push back and say, no, you put that in the wrong category, Glaucon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think Plato liked his wrestling, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So,
right.
Yeah. And just, I think this is obvious, but let it be known when we're in any of these series where we are trying to summarize and offer a commentary, we're not necessarily endorsing anything that we're putting out here. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. But my goal for this is to be as just fair-minded on any of these texts that we can for people who are, I mean, look, at this point, if people listen to our podcast, they know where we stand on things, right? But I want to present these texts as fairly and as objectively as we can, which is never completely objectively.
And this isn't exhaustive either. There's so much more that can be done. Yeah.
Yeah. So excellent. Okay. If you were to just kind of like, here are the, I don't know, 2 or 3 big things to really keep in mind that you're supposed to get out of book 2, what would that be, Jim? And then we can take some questions from the listeners.
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of, So first I always say that like when you're reading the Republic, there's 2 things you can read it for. You can read it for the actual argument that runs throughout every page of the book, right? Okay, but you can also kind of go around looking for these little crumbs that are sort of ancillary to the argument that come up throughout. Okay, so let me do some crumbs first, right? Because I think we have a sense of where the big argument's going here, right? You get this very great reminder to us about how different the Greeks are from us in ways that maybe should trouble us because maybe we're missing something here. It's just given throughout the text that the condition of your body and the condition of your soul are not unrelated things, right? Okay. And the question is, do you begin by trying to reform the soul and then thereby reform the body, or do you reform the body and thereby reform the soul? Socrates comes out and says, no, you reform the soul, right, in order to reform the body. But no, the two go together, right? Okay. And we've talked about that at length on the show before, right? The other point is when you get into this, I think it's important for the bigger picture. So the overriding theme of the education of the guardians in book 2 is censorship, right? Like, what books are we going to ban, or like what are we going to edit out of the books, right? If you look very carefully at what's going on there, okay, whatever we think about banning books and all that, and remember, this is all a metaphor for how we treat ourselves, right? The number one, it's the theological myths that have to be dealt with, okay? And what Plato or what Socrates does is he says, where there is disagreement among the gods, where there's indecision among the gods, where the gods change from one form to another, right? Where they show an internal plurality, right? Where the gods are complex and not simple, that's all got to go. Okay. Right. Yeah. And so, because once again, where are we going from? This is a great big pushback against the tragic polytheistic view of the human person, moving towards this optimistic monotheism about the human person, right? And so what is Socrates doing there? He's kind of demythologizing theology here in a way, right? To try to make it rationally accessible through this unification of the deities, right? Which I think is a very, very important theme for the rest of the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody, just quick comment here, and then we'll take to some questions, because I'm actually pro-ban sending books. Yeah, like it's well, so was Plato,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So has essentially, I think, every society at some time or other, and this is a a wonderful thing to consider, right? And to think about, because our society is banning books, at least in certain aspects right now. I mean, at least parts of our society have deemed that some books should not be available to the general public. I mean, Amazon struck down Ryan Anderson's book, just completely got rid of it because it went against the mainstream narrative. Now, for the book, of course, was extremely well researched, wasn't at all polemical, but it was banned. So I would say that was an instance where
I just ordered a book this weekend from Barnes and Noble that had been banned by Amazon.
Right. Yeah, and it's the
second place guy's not going to ban anything because he just wants to make a sale. Right.
So I mean, there's like the two considerations there. Like, one is that, like, look, some ideas, once they grip people, especially if they're evil ideas, like, it's kind of like a virus, right? So like there's an idea here that isn't completely implausible of, like, maybe we should try and, like, prevent this virus from taking hold of people in some respect. The flip side of that is, well, who's going to be adjudicating this, right? And who's going to be deciding, right, what those evil ideas or books are, and what sort of guarantee do we have that they're not going to ban the stuff that's good and holistic and not promote the stuff that's evil and stuff like that, right? And this, of course, is the great tension, the great debate.
Short of a philosopher king manifesting him or herself, I'm not confident we have such an authority we can rely on to do this. Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing. Like, if you have the philosopher king, then it's like, okay, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. But if you have just a tyrant in there, it seems like giving that sort of power would be pretty much the worst idea. Yeah. Right.
And actually, there's in book 4, there's a moment in there where I think Plato's views on personal liberty are going to be much more subtle than, like, all the talk of censorship lead on. Right. Mm-hmm. So stay tuned. Bookmark for book 4, for scroll 4. Right.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yeah. Yeah.
Should we take some questions?
I saw Saul, asked, do we give Plato for laying out credit for laying out a version of divine simplicity? Yes, I think we do. Or I think what you have in Plato, is his understanding of the need for divine simplicity. In order
and immutability
and immutability. Yeah. I mean, in same, right. And he's seeing the need for it, to ground a practical account. Right. And this will also come up in Aristotle's metaphysics too. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, that the way that is, or the reason that that's postulated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not presumably because of the same method that, say, an Aquinas would take to get to simplicity and immutability, but it's more of a deeply practical concern
Yeah.
here for Plato.
But I will say this is Thomas gets to it. His preferred argument for God's existence is a version of Aristotle's argument for the unmoved mover, right? I mean, he's got other ones, but he says the most accessible one is this one, right? And Aristotle's unmoved mover, it moves everything by being the good by which they all pursue, right? Mm-hmm. And he then said, and Aristotle will argue that good would have to be fully actual and thereby unchanging and completely simply. He very quickly goes to the same things, right? So I think even Thomas is really up to something very similar to what's even going back to the form of the good in the Republic, yeah.
Right, rock and roll. Good. Send in whatever questions you have here, gentle listeners. We'll take a couple here before we wrap this one up. Let me scroll back up, see what we have. Saul says, listen to Scroll 2 today during my morning track session. Good. Yeah. Listen while you're working out. Why not? What did I have in my headphones today? Actually, I had an old AC/DC album on today. Blow Up Your Video. If anybody remembers that one.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Good, underrated album. Saul says, I appreciate Jim's context setting. It's hard to read this through our current natural law view without just saying these guys are extreme cynics.
Yeah. Yeah. It took me a long time to get to that myself. So
yeah. If you have, that's why I called out Thomas specifically. I'm like, if you're Thomas and you're coming from a natural law perspective, you got to sort of broaden the way you're thinking about justice and not import your sort of just, I guess, Thomistic assumptions into this, or else you're going to be slightly confused, right? I love the way that you talked about the justice as a meta virtue.
Yeah,
yes, I think that perfectly encapsulates what's going on, right? Excellent. All right. BR again, probably not pronouncing that right, said, it just hit me that in economics, when they say goods, they refer to things that are good. As in that we desire them, yes.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, and not entirely different from Plato. It's, what's a good? It's something you want, right?
Right.
Now, there's some things you want that you're better off not having, Plato would say, right?
Right. The funny thing is how like the term value sort of originated in economic discourse and then got imported back over to moral discourse, right? Yeah. And has just created almost endless confusion, which is part of McIntyre's gripe. Yeah. He's like, let's get rid of this stuff. Let's just go back to the good, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's talk about goods. Yeah.
Ira says, can we say something about vincible and invincible ignorance? Sure can. What would you like us to say?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, on that, I want to bookmark that one for book 3-4 because that stuff's going to come up.
Cool.
That's all right.
So that's fine by me. So Irish, we will cover that, and if you have anything more specific about it, just let us know. And we'll do it soon because we're going to try and get this series done fairly quickly, it seems. Saul says, doing anything that isn't self-serving is only done for appearance, self-service, or for suckers, seemed the brother's assertion.
That is Glaucon's concern. That is Glaucon's worry. Yeah.
Right. Which is, echoed in psychological egoism and certainly like Ayn Rand and other thinkers, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it's a worry, right? I mean, Kant will worry about this, because Kant's got this, high sense of disinterested, moral action, right? And he'll even say, look, maybe no one's ever pulled this off. It doesn't mean though it's not a human possibility, right?
Right. And I think this is where Aristotle is so helpful, where you see like there's actually not. So the worry of the psychological egoist is like there can be no altruism, right?
Yeah.
It's all selfishness. Not even self-interestedness, but selfishness, as Rand would push it, right? And I want to say that's just not the right way of thinking about it. Like we have natures that are inclined toward our own fulfillment and happiness, but as it happens, what will make us happy are being altruistic people, right? Like at the end of the day, our fulfillment is in willing the good of other people. So there's, in a proper view of this, right? You don't have to say that we're not self-interested or that we don't seek our own happiness. Of course we do. But that's compatible and actually fulfilled in willing the good of others and living a just life, right? And I think that's right.
In one, like the Greeks are psychological egoists. Like they think you cannot coherently will something unless it accrues to you some good, right? To will it is in part to see it as a good, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I think, and this is the point you're making, Pat, is that Aristotle, and Plato would say the same, but Aristotle's much more explicit about it. He thinks that there are good, like we now, because we do all think like Max Weber now, right? Or we do all think in economic terms. That's unfair to Weber, but anyway, we do think of like the way what a common good would be where we get like there's this finite amount of resources and we get a good split on it, right? So we all get a decent part of it, right? Aristotle believes that there are bona fide common goods in the sense that the only way Jim gets all of that good is if Pat gets all of that good.
Right. Like a symphony, for example.
Like a symphony. Yeah. And think of it like for like a marriage, right? If you understand what marriage really is, you realize like the only way Jim gets the whole good of marriage is if Jen gets the whole good of marriage, right? It's not a good that is parceled out into pieces that can be traded. It's all or none for every participant, right? And once you understand that, like what Aristotle sees like the good life as is a common good, right? Yeah, I'm pursuing this for my sake, but no, I only have that good for Aristotle, the degree to which like the people in my life have it too. I need friends, right?
Yeah, that's excellent. I like the distinction between collective good and common good in these types of conversations. I think that like helps draw out what you're getting at, right? Again, a certain non-competitiveness and the certain real common goods are found in true cooperation, friendship, altruism, as properly understood, stuff like that. All right, let's take a few more here. Sal says, not just books suck us into bad addiction and behavior. We saw what happened to Augustine's friend on his first trip to the gladiator fights. Yes.
Yeah.
Many bad things.
Many bad things. Look at, yes.
Next one says, I agree with you guys that the Republic is about personal well-being, but I truly believe in fractals. So I expect a virtuous person to reflect a virtuous city. So why does the city by Plato seem off? Right. So yeah, fair question, right? Because this has been a something of a criticism of Plato's Republic, right? Is that like this guy's trying to trot out a totalitarian right system here, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things. Like one, I forget if it's book 5 or 6, Plato's going to say, I know this could never happen. Like Socrates says, I know we can never pull this off, right? And Plato's just coming back from like a decade-long attempt to pull it off in Sicily. It didn't work. Okay. Not this exact thing. And also, I think, I'm going to go back. This sounds like a broken record on this, is the conversation is happening in a city of thieves, right? And so Plato, I think what he's saying is, look, this would be a nightmare to try to do this here, okay, here in the physical world, okay? But Plato doesn't think ideals are ever actually fully instantiated in the physical world, right? This becomes this whole argument for immortality, right? Is that the ideal cannot be here because this world is a moving target. It's mutable, it's fallible, all those things. Do you see that? So why does Plato's city seem a little off to us? It's because we don't fully see the ideal here, and the ideal can't happen where we are right now. Okay. And think of it, if indeed you really did have the philosopher king, whatever that would be, that had a perfect knowledge of the good, right? Wouldn't that be a game changer on things like, right? So on censorship, stuff like that. It's just that we're like, well, wait, any ruler we have is going to be fallible and, subject to factional influence and all that stuff. So if you let them ban this book, they're going to ban your book next week. Yes, right, totally. For those of us who live in the city of thieves, which is all of us, right? But that doesn't tell me what the ideal is, right? And that's Plato's point.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, look, there's like specifics here. We've talked about this before, Jim, where certainly I don't want to speak for Jim, where I would be like, I just think Plato was off on that.
I mean, when he comes out for the infanticide.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking about. Like, it's like there's like lines are like, if this thing somehow forces itself into existence, well, we'll take care of it. Right. It's like, dude, I mean,
like that. He's going to say as if like you, like, okay, so like The only people who can have sex whenever they want are menopausal women, right?
Right,
Okay, right. And then he's going to say, yeah, but if for some chance one of them got pregnant, you got to kill the kid immediately. I mean,
Yeah.
these are
we're gonna part ways hard.
we are
Plato
partying
there,
with
right?
Plato on that one, right? Okay, yeah.
But this is important to understand that like you can have good groundwork, and you can just not follow through well on your own groundwork in many instances. And I think we would say that of many of these thinkers, right? It's like Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, same thing. Like, man, he really laid some awesome groundwork, but yeah, I think he's actually off on this particular application, or he could have been better over here.
Problematic,
right? Yeah. I mean, I would say the same even with St. Thomas too, right? And St. Thomas says that himself. He's like, as you start getting further and further into the specifics, like it gets harder and harder to adjudicate.
And and Plato, he's making a claim what the ideal is, and we're disputing with Plato what the ideal is, right? And another thing is, I think those of us who are formed, by events since 1776, okay, right? The American founders did not set out to produce the ideal, right? They set out to produce something that could operate humanely in the city of thieves, right? Okay, so I think a lot of times people are like looking at somehow Plato giving us good advice of how we should like think about the American Republic. No, all right, Plato is writing what the ideal would be, and keep in mind the ideal is a form for Plato. It ain't here. It's it's an idea.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, this is not a blueprint for how to run your your nation state, right? It's a thought experiment for how to get justice in your soul. What's your website again, Jim's? Brendan wants to know.
Thank you, Brendan. jdmadden.com.
And what's coming down the pipeline over there?
I will be putting up part 2 of the introduction to a new book there soon as a blog post, probably in the next couple of days. There should be a new Cozingram dialogue podcast. They'll be linking there sometime this week, right?
Excellent.
And there's another essay I'm hoping to complete on the fitness side for that too, possibly all this week. We'll see.
jdmadden.com. All right, let's take one more here. Steve says, was Pat a supporter of the alt-right? I know alt-rock. Yeah. I know almost next to nothing about the alt-right. But I will say I am acknowledged and thanked in one of the books that tries to give a deep examination of the alt-right. It's by Michael Malice. And Michael and I got to be pretty good friends a couple years ago. I don't know. Michael and I are sort of worlds apart philosophically, despite our friendship. He's an anarcho-capitalist. I don't think he would say that he's really sympathetic with the alt-right, but he wanted to do a deep analysis on it. And it's called The New Right, A Journey to the Fringe of American Politics. And he acknowledges me and thanks me in there, but I've never read the book. Sorry, Michael. I actually read it. So I'm just a classical conservative. That's what I am. And I heard Rob Coons put it well. I think I used to be very liberal. Then I used to be very libertarian. Now I'm just a very classical conservative. Where Rob Coons says,
"Sounds like you turned 30, man."
Yeah, right. And except the way I think about it, I think is how Rob thinks about it. That it's not conservatism is not a political ideology. It's a commitment to virtue, right? That seems right to me, right? It's not a competing ideology with classical liberalism or communism or something like that. And I think if you compare them like that, then you're just thinking about it in the completely wrong way, right?
Ben Sass, who's a senator just up in Nebraska for me, had what was his second book? What was the title again? Them, I think it was. It's about polarization in America. He has a great footnote in that book where he defines a conservative is anyone who thinks that there's a debt of gratitude to the past.
Right. That's what the conservative does. We feel like we have obligations to the past as well. Of course. Brandon says, "Damn yo, Pat hanging with Malice. That's a strange crossover." So, Malice and I haven't caught up with him in a while, but I was on his show I went to New York to be on his show. He's been on my show before.
Cool.
If you just Google Pat Flynn, Michael Malice Chronicles of Strength, it'll come up. You can hear.
That's cool.
I think we talked about stoicism one time, problems of higher education. Jim, if you think you're hard on the academy, you hear Michael Malice go off on it, man.
Yeah. I'd like to meet him.
Yeah, he's a funny dude. He's a funny dude.
Yeah.
Like I say, I part ways with him on many different issues. But as it happens, you can be good friends with people you don't agree with. On
No, oh my gosh. I mean, just get Pat and me talking about near-death experiences, Manuel.
Right. Yeah.
No, as you know, I've softened because of you.
Yeah, but I mean, there's the cool things is because like that's oftentimes when wisdom can really flow is when you have a good relationship with somebody and you care about somebody else, that like you don't have to worry about a disagreement exploding into something really stupid, and you can kind of like in the Republic just work through things, and through that process hopefully come to greater insight. So I, even though I'm still fascinated in near-death experiences, our conversations around them, Jim, have greatly caused me to consider ways of interpreting them that I previously had not considered. So it's been
and same here.
Right. Yeah.
By the way, this is kind of like, the dialectic that goes on. right. Friends talking. Right? I just saw it was at Beringen 13.
Yep.
It said he was excited to hear I was on Cozingram, and that's actually my 5th time I think I was on Cozingram, and he can find the other 4 episodes at jdmadden.com. And if he's a Cozingram fan, he should note too that Pat just dropped an episode with IJ, right? Where IJ was a guest on from the Cozingram on the Pat Flynn show. So please check all that out. We're big fans of the Cozingram dialogue. Yeah.
That was, I know I say this a lot, but that was one of my favorite conversations.
It was a good one, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. It's fresh. So if you just scroll back within the last week, you will see that conversation, and we will be having a part 2. All right, very good. I think we should wrap it up there. We've been going for a while, so we'll be back with book 3 soon. Friends, if you're enjoying this series, please comment for the algorithm, like, share, subscribe. It helps the channel out, and we will catch all of you.
We're going all the way. 10 books, friends.
All 10.
10 scrolls.
See you next time.
See ya.
Peace.
Peace.